Hello, my name is Alina, and I'm a scientist that specializes in epidemiology and public health research. I'm here today to talk to you about science, and today's topic is the hierarchy of scientific evidence. Not surprisingly, some forms of scientific evidence are better than others, and by better, I mean that some are less prone to bias, and some are considered stronger forms of inquiry due to the type of results they produce. So let's dig into that, because I think it's really important to consider when you're deciding whether the research you're looking at is good and or bad. Ready? Let's go! There are a variety of practical methods of ranking scientific evidence that have been proposed over the years. There are different rankings for different professions, uses, and some are still in development. This type of ranking of different types of scientific evidence based on its potential for bias in data collection and the strength of the results obtained is very important. As I've mentioned, it's something to consider when determining if what we're reading is good or bad science. This can be important to us personally as science consumers, but it's critical to larger undertakings like evidence-based medicine or evidence-based public health practice. Today, I'll be reviewing a simple hierarchy that might be of use to the average health science consumer. This categorization has 7 levels, in order of importance. I'll be starting at the bottom with the weakest form of evidence and working my way up to the top with the best of the best. Then I'll touch briefly on how you can tell what type of evidence you are looking at. But before we start, I have an important caveat. Warning. I'm about to say something that might be controversial. Anecdotal information, on its own, is not scientific evidence. I'm so glad I got that off my chest. Anecdotal evidence is a personal testimony, experience, or view about something. It's important to remember that that person's experience isn't necessarily representative of the typical or average experience or view. Anecdotal evidence is not gathered using the scientific method, and it can be subject to mountains of bias. Anecdotal information can be a good launching point for new directions of inquiry, if there's enough of it, but on its own, it's not science. I mention this because many of us fall into the trap of equating anecdotal information to actually scientifically gathered evidence, but the two are not equal. Comparing them doesn't make much sense, and the misuse of anecdotal evidence can lead us into informal fallacy, or a reasoning error. It is often referred to as the person who fallacy. I know a person who, etc. This type of reasoning might lead us to interpret this type of information from someone close to us or from an information source that we inherently like as more important than any other type of information. Moving along, let's look at the bottom of our hierarchy. Expert opinion includes experts' standalone opinions. They can appear in letters, opinion pieces, media, news appearances, editorials, consensus among experts, that kind of thing. The trick here is to consider who do we accept as an expert. Expert opinion is considered a weak form of scientific evidence if it isn't supported by more rigorous research. That is, it's looked at things higher up on the hierarchy. Expert opinion isn't experimental or observational, but if it's coming from the right person and is unbiased, it can fall in this hierarchy. Next, we have case reports and case series. Case reports are carefully documented records of a topic or item of scientific interest. Case reports can be important in starting or directing a new line of inquiry, like finding a new infectious disease. Case series are similar to case reports, but they track multiple case reports simultaneously. Case reports and case series cannot prove causation, only correlation. Next, we have cross-sectional studies. Cross-sectional studies are a descriptive, observational type of research that are important for measuring prevalence of things like health outcomes or determinants of health in a population at a specific given point in time. One good example is they can be used to explore the etiology or the potential causes of disease. But results from these studies have to be interpreted carefully, as they cannot prove cause and effect. A major source of bias in cross-sectional studies is how the sample is chosen. Who is included, who is excluded. The aim of these studies is to give information about an entire population of interest. So if we don't control for selection bias, it would be difficult to extrapolate any results to the whole population that we're interested in. Next, we have case control studies. Case control studies are an observational type of research design that is retrospective. That is, it goes back in time. This type of research uses the scientific method. It includes two groups of subjects, one with a certain condition and one without. The purpose is to look at these two groups' histories and try and figure out if there was some common trait or exposure in the past that led to the condition in question. Case control studies can show correlation, but they can't prove causation. Next on our list are cohort studies. Cohort studies are like case control studies in that they are observational and they use the scientific method. However, they are different in that instead of looking back, they are prospective and they look forward. There are two groups of subjects involved, one with a certain attribute like a treatment and one without, and it compares them over time. Next, we have randomized controlled trials. Randomized controlled trials, or RCTs, are scientific research. They are experimental in nature, and they are the most rigorous form of primary research. RCTs place subjects into two groups randomly. For example, one group could get a treatment and the other could get a placebo. In blind RCTs, participants do not know which group they're in. In double-blind RCTs, both participant and researcher do not know what group the participant is in. This blinding is key to removing bias from results. And finally, at the top of our pyramid, we have systematic reviews. Systematic reviews are high-level, exhaustive overviews of the results from multiple RCTs about a specific scientific question. Often done by a panel of experts, this is a comprehensive consolidation of scientific research. Systematic reviews use a very specific protocol to carefully consider what studies to include and how to evaluate their quality. The end result is the creation of a comprehensive piece of scientific literature that is a summary of all the research done on that specific question. In doing this, systematic reviews can mitigate bias in individual studies and create a more complete picture of the topic under inquiry. Now, caution. Don't confuse reviews or literature reviews with systematic reviews. They are very different things. Reviews and literature reviews do not use a systematic approach or protocol and can be very prone to bias as they are based on an author's preference for articles. Systematic reviews, on the other hand, use a specific protocol, and they're actually a secondary form of research. An example of a type of a systematic review is a meta-analysis. This type of review uses statistical methods to combine data from multiple RCTs and uses this pooled data to confirm or make new conclusions. This can result in stronger statistics because the size and diversity of the sample increases. However, if not done properly, this can produce misleading results, and it often comes down to the quality of data being used and how the analysis is done. So we've reviewed the hierarchy. Now, how do we know what kind of evidence we're looking at? The best way to know what you're looking at is to consider where you got that information from and what it is identified as. For scientifically reported information in a scientific literature database, a study will usually say what it is. You can find that in the title, in the study design, or methodology sections. Sometimes you have to dig for it. For experts in the media, I suggest doing a quick Google search. Is the expert affiliated with a well-known organization or an institution? Could they have a conflict of interest? Are they talking out of their area of expertise? As for anecdotal information, you will hear it from informal sources, like a blog, a YouTube channel, a TikTok video. and it's usually a non-expert. Or you could hear it as a personal anecdote from a friend of a friend. Or we could feel it as a gut feeling or a parental instinct. Now, I'm not saying these things aren't important, but they should not hold the same level of importance in our health decision making as actual good science does. So, now that we've covered all of that, how do we decide if the science in front of us is the right kind of science for the topic we are investigating? What we have to do is consider the question we're trying to answer. What type of results would be appropriate to answer that question? For example, it would not be enough for a drug safety trial to say we've tried a cross-sectional study and everyone seemed fine. We're going to need a higher standard of result than that. An RCT or a series of RCTs would be best, perhaps followed by a meta-analysis. And we also have to consider that some forms of scientific evidence are not always possible to create due to logistical or ethical reasons. Researchers have a lot to consider. Would this type of research be effective, appropriate, or feasible to their specific line of inquiry? They also have to keep in mind timelines, budgets, access to resources. There's a lot going on. And don't forget, there are other factors to look at when considering if the scientific evidence you are reading is good and or bad. Please follow this link to another one of my videos that talks about just that. So that's it. That's our hierarchy of scientific evidence. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I really appreciate you being here. Please consider subscribing and liking this video for further content. If there's a particular topic you'd like to hear about next, please leave a comment below. See you next time. Bye.